I want to tell you something that took me most of a lifetime to fully respect. The fastest way to make money dangerous is to make it visible. Most people think wealth is threatened by bad investments, bad taxes, bad timing, bad luck, bad markets, bad partners. All of that is true. All of that can hurt you. But there is something even more subtle, more social, more corrosive, and far harder to reverse once it begins. Talk. That is the one people underestimate. Not because talk is dramatic, because talk changes the field. The moment you speak too clearly about your money, your plans, your edge, your future distributions, or even your generosity, you have altered the environment around you. You have sent out a signal, and once a signal goes out, people stop meeting you as a human being and start meeting you through a number. That is the real danger. Not that people become evil. Most of them do not. It is that money changes the geometry of every interaction it enters. That is why I want to start with the central metaphor. I call it the flare. Imagine you are on black water at night. You are not drowning. You are not lost. You have a raft, provisions, direction, and enough calm to make it to shore. Now imagine firing a flare anyway. Why would you do that if you are actually safe? The flare does not help you. It only exposes you. It does not merely attract rescuers. It attracts everything that now knows there is something worth moving toward. Money works exactly like that. The moment you signal it by naming it, hinting at it, dressing it too loudly, explaining it too precisely, or discussing it too casually, you attract need, you attract expectation, you attract stories, you attract calculations, you attract other people's deficits toward your surplus. That is not paranoia. That is human nature. And people are not even usually malicious about it. That is the uncomfortable part. The people who paddle toward the flare are often decent people. A cousin, a friend, a coworker, a child, a neighbor, a person under pressure, a person who just learned because you told them that there may be more resource in your world than in theirs. The problem is not them. The problem is the signal. Once you understand the signal problem, silence stops looking cold. It starts looking rational. It starts looking like risk management. It starts looking like the operating system of durable wealth. That is the heart of what I want to give you. Not 5 cheap secrets, 5 pressure points, 5 areas where speaking too freely can cost you more than a bad investment would have cost you. Because a bad investment can be repaired, a tax bill can be survived, a bad year can be recovered from. But once a signal has changed the emotional economics of a relationship, or a negotiation, or a family, the consequences can last for years, sometimes decades. So let me begin with the first principle. Never let anyone know the actual number. I do not mean vaguely. I mean exactly. Your actual net worth, your liquid assets, your portfolio size, your cash position, your annual income. If it is materially different from what people assume, the real number, protect it. There are 2 reasons for this. The first is psychological. The human mind does not process wealth in absolute terms. It processes it in relative terms. If people think you are doing fine, but in the same general weather system they are in, they can still interact with you as a peer. There is still flexibility, there is still mutuality, there is still the illusion, helpful and stabilizing, that both of you live under roughly the same sky. But the moment a hard number appears, the relationship shifts. That number becomes a reference point, and reference points are tyrants. Once someone knows the number, every future interaction gets unconsciously measured against it. The restaurant bill, the vacation invitation, the birthday gift, the loan request, the small favor, the wedding contribution, the career advice, the inheritance assumption, the casual resentment, the silent comparison. None of this needs to be spoken to exist. It exists the moment the number lands, and once it lands, it does not leave. You have handed them a ruler. Now, every interaction has a measuring device inside it. That is the first problem. The second problem is economic. Every supplier, agent, contractor, seller, advisor, and negotiator is constantly making a private estimate of what you can afford. Not what the thing is worth, what you can afford. This is not because people are monsters. It is because markets are built out of informational asymmetry. Every negotiation is a quiet struggle over reservation price. What is your ceiling? What are you capable of paying? How much pain can you absorb? How urgent are you? How liquid are you? Your lifestyle answers these questions for people before you do. Your car answers them. Your house answers them. Your watch answers them. Your vacations answer them. Your offhand stories answer them. Even your supposed modesty can answer them if it sounds too curated. This is why I have always believed there is enormous power in living in a way that does not invite pricing. A simple car is not merely modesty, it is negotiation armor. A modest house is not merely restraint, it is social camouflage. A quiet life keeps other people from building a price theory around you. And once people cannot build a good price theory around you, your optionality improves. That matters more than vanity ever will. That is why when someone asks how you are doing financially, you must learn to become elegantly vague. Not dishonest. Things are fine. We are working through a few priorities. I have a lot tied up. It is a strange season. All good, but I am keeping things tight. These are all perfectly serviceable answers. You do not owe anybody an audit. The number is yours. Treat it like an organ, not a party trick. Now let me move to the second principle. Never announce a plan before it exists. I want you to notice how often people do this. They speak about deals before they close, moves before they make them, new businesses before they launch them, relocations before they sign anything, allocations before they buy, books before they write them, strategies before they test them. They do this because talking feels like progress. That talking often gives you the emotional reward of completion without requiring the labor of completion. Your brain is very easy to flatter this way. If you tell people what you are about to do and they react with admiration, your chemistry shifts. You feel momentarily accomplished. You feel like a person already in motion. You feel like the work is half done. It is not half done. It has not begun. But your motivation has already been partially paid out. That is why so many plans die after being announced. They did not fail because the plan was impossible. They failed because the emotional payment arrived before the mechanical work. And there is a second layer here that matters even more. The moment you announce a plan, you invite outside weather into a structure that has not yet been roofed. Doubt, questions, unsolicited advice, warnings, projection, jealousy, competition, curiosity from the wrong people, premature expectations from the right people. All of it enters before there is anything concrete enough to withstand it. A plan that is still soft should not be exposed to hard voices. The great builders understand this instinctively. They are infuriatingly quiet. You ask what they are working on and they say, a few things. You ask if they are making a move and they say, not yet. You ask if they are investing in something and they say, still thinking. Then 6 months later there is an asset, a company, a transaction, a result, something real, something now too concrete to be talked out of existence. That is the order. Build first, discuss later. I have seen too many people reverse it. The world has plenty of opinions for your finished thing. It does not need previews of your intention. And there is one more thing. Information leaks, always. That person tells another because they are excited. That person tells another because they are curious. Before long, something that was supposed to be private strategy has become ambient knowledge, and ambient knowledge kills edges. Which brings me to the third principle. Your edge is not meant to be shared. I want you to hear that carefully. I am not talking about being selfish. I am talking about understanding what an edge is. And it is a pocket of asymmetry. It is whatever you know, see, understand, or can execute that other people either do not notice, do not believe, or do not yet know how to price. That is where unusual returns come from. Sometimes it is a niche market. Sometimes it is a process insight. Sometimes it is a relationship network. Sometimes it is the discipline to do something nobody else can emotionally tolerate. Sometimes it is simply speed paired with silence. Whatever it is, the edge only exists while the asymmetry exists. The moment you reveal the mechanism broadly, the asymmetry begins to close. And when the asymmetry closes, the edge begins to die. This is one of the great misunderstandings of the modern age. People now believe that every valuable thing should become content. Every process should become a thread. Every method should become a masterclass. Every useful strategy should become 5 lessons I learned. The reason I distrust most of that culture is simple. If someone truly found a gold seam that still pays at high rates, their first instinct will not be to invite a crowd with shovels, it will be to keep digging. Now, sometimes people teach because the original edge has matured or because selling the map is now more profitable than mining the ground. Fine, that is a business model. But do not confuse that business model with the original wealth building model that created the thing. They are different businesses. One is extraction, the other is explanation. And explanation, by definition, exposes the mechanism. This is why the best operators I know protect their edge, the way serious companies protect intellectual property. They are not casual about it. They do not announce it. They do not package it just to feel seen. They do not leak it over drinks to sound smart. They understand that the recipe is the business. Once the recipe is common, the margin compresses. That is just physics. So when you discover something that truly works for you, a way of buying, a way of structuring, a way of negotiating, a way of identifying mispricing, do not rush to turn that into identity theater. Let it remain an edge. Let it earn. You can always become generous later if the edge is exhausted and you genuinely want to teach. But never confuse applause with return. One is hot, one is durable. Now let me go to the fourth principle, and this is the one that makes people most uncomfortable. What you plan to do with your money when you die should not be an ongoing conversation with the people waiting to live after you. I know this sounds harsh. It is not harsh. It is merciful. There is a fantasy people like to repeat, that total transparency in families produces harmony. Sometimes it does. With most things, I like truth. With inheritance, I like structure because knowledge of future money does not sit quietly inside a human being. It begins to shape them. Not always in visible ways, often in subtle ways. A child who knows there is real money waiting eventually makes different internal calculations than a child who does not know. The urgency changes, the hunger changes, the risk tolerance changes, the appetite for struggle changes, the willingness to endure lean years changes. The tolerance for boredom and ordinary work changes. The imagination begins leaning forward towards something unearned. You may not see this in the first year or the fifth, but I have watched it happen enough times to tell you plainly, foreknowledge of inheritance is one of the most reliable forms of motivational anesthesia ever invented. Not because children are weak, because necessity is one of the great forges of adulthood. Remove necessity too early, and you do not just remove pain, you remove development. That is why I have always believed children should receive enough to do anything, but not enough to do nothing. But here is the harder truth, that principle is not only about amount, it is about knowledge. When they know too early, the money begins distorting life before it is ever received. And that is not the only danger. The moment inheritance becomes a topic with specific numbers, family life can become contaminated by a quiet ranking system. Who gets what, why, when, what it says about fairness, what it says about who was trusted, who was favored, who was indulged, who was punished, who already got help, who never got help, who needs more, who deserves less. The logic may all make sense on paper. Paper does not have a nervous system, families do, and once numbers are attached to identity, wounds form quickly. Resentments appear before death, not after. People begin negotiating in their heads. They reinterpret old memories in light of expected distributions. They become historians of perceived favoritism. This is poison, and it often begins with someone wanting to be honest. Do not confuse honesty with overexposure. Tell your family that things are handled. Tell them there is a plan. Tell them they will not be abandoned. Good, that is enough. The details belong with your spouse and your professionals, not at Thanksgiving, not in the kitchen after wine, not over years of subtle expectation. Building a healthy inheritance should arrive as structure, not as a family sport. Now, let me move to the fifth principle. Never talk about the good things you do for people. This is the one that looks morally soft until you understand what it protects. We live in an age where generosity has become performance. Charity is content. Kindness is branding. Donations are screenshots. Good deeds are story assets. People act as if broadcasting their virtue multiplies its value. Sometimes it may inspire. I am willing to concede that. But it also does something else. It converts private virtue into public signal. And once signal enters, expectation follows. That is where the trouble begins. If people know you have been generous, they do not just admire it. They begin filing you mentally into a category: potential source, reliable donor, maybe available, maybe approachable, maybe guilty enough to help, maybe soft, maybe useful. Again, none of this requires bad people. It only requires noticing. And noticing is what human beings do. This is why I have always preferred the inner scorecard to the outer one. If you do something generous and no one knows, something very important happens. You discover whether you were doing it for the act or for the echo that matters. Because private generosity builds character, public generosity often builds identity theater. And identity theater is expensive to maintain. There is a second advantage too. Private generosity cannot be turned into social leverage against you later. Public generosity. The moment people know you give, the line forms, the requests become easier to make, the pressure becomes softer and therefore harder to resist. The person asking does not feel like they are asking for something unreasonable. They have evidence, you are generous, you care, you help. And suddenly, instead of one act of quiet virtue, you have created an expectation market around yourself. That is not kindness, that is exposure. So if you help, help. If you give, give. If you save someone, save them. Then close your mouth. Let the act remain whole. Do not cheapen it by turning it into broadcast evidence. There is another version of this same principle that matters just as much. Do not broadcast your pressure points either. Do not casually tell the world where you are squeezed, anxious, overextended, desperate, worried, or unsure. I am not saying never ask for help. Help matters. Trusted counsel matters. But publicizing your pressure is like writing your negotiating weakness on your forehead. It changes how people deal with you, sometimes subtly, sometimes ruthlessly. The person who appears calm, liquid, unhurried, and not especially needy has an enormous advantage in the world. Not because life is easier for them, because they are not giving the market their soft spots for free. And desperation, more than perhaps any other state, is expensive. Desperate people sell too low, borrow too badly, agree too quickly, reveal too much. Let me pull all 5 principles together because they are not random rules. Do not reveal the number. Do not announce unfinished plans. Do not leak your edge. Do not let inheritance become family theater. Do not make your generosity a public identity. What connects them? Friction. That is what connects them. The minute you talk too much about money, you create friction. Social friction, negotiation friction, expectation friction, emotional friction, identity friction. And in any compounding system, friction is devastating. People dramatically underestimate this because friction rarely looks catastrophic at the beginning. It looks like one uncomfortable ask, one slight resentment, one slightly worse quote, one strange family dinner, one cousin who now looks at you differently, one child who begins waiting instead of building, one friend who begins measuring, one colleague who now understands more than they should, one conversation that seemed harmless. That is how the damage begins. Then it compounds, and that is why silence is not merely personality. It is compounding protection. If you protect your informational boundary, you are not just protecting feelings. You are protecting rates of return, you are protecting negotiating power, you are protecting family structure, you are protecting your future self from having to manage emotional consequences that never needed to exist. I want to be clear about something. Silence is not isolation. Silence is not distrust. Silence is not the absence of intimacy. You absolutely need a circle, a spouse, a very small number of trusted professionals, perhaps 1 or 2 people whose judgment has been tested across years and real consequence. Good. Tell them. They are inside the walls. What I am telling you is that most people have walls that are far too wide. They share in moments that feel warm, instead of moments that serve a purpose. They treat money, talk like ordinary transparency. It is not ordinary. Money is one of the strongest solvents in human relationships used correctly. It builds freedom. Spoken carelessly, it dissolves equilibrium. There is one more thing I want to give you, because it may be the single clearest indicator of real wealth. The strongest signal of actual wealth is the absence of performance. That is what people miss. Performers look rich. Real wealth often looks unremarkable. The performer wants to be recognized. The builder wants to remain underestimated. The performer makes the car speak. The builder lets silence speak. The performer curates impressions. The builder protects optionality. I have known many people who assembled an impressive external portrait of success. The houses, the cars, the watches, the visible consumption, the story. And behind the portrait sat leverage, fragility, pressure, and one bad year from collapse. I have also known a much smaller group who had resources so deep you could not have guessed them in 100 tries. Same house for decades, simple habits, unshowy routines, no visible theater, no need to be recognized, no instinct to explain themselves. Those people were not hiding because they were afraid. They were hiding because they understood the cost of being seen and they had chosen not to pay it. That is the unwritten rule. The fish that keeps its mouth closed does not get caught. The fortune that keeps its signals low compounds with less interference. The family that is not forced to negotiate against future money remains closer for longer. The negotiator who looks less liquid often gets the better deal. The planner who says less builds more. The giver who stays quiet keeps virtue whole. That is the philosophy of financial silence. Not because secrecy is noble, because exposure is expensive. Your number is yours. Your plans are yours until they are real. Your edge is yours until it is exhausted. Your estate is yours until it becomes a document. Your generosity is yours if it is real. Protect them, not with fear, with discipline. Because if you do, 5 years from now, your position will not merely be larger, it will be calmer, cleaner, more private, more protected. And in wealth, protection is not the opposite of growth. Protection is what allows growth to survive.